Well, praise and glory and honor to the only wise God, the only true God, and Jesus Christ who he sent, the Lord God omnipotent. The Lord God omnipotent reigns. There's only one Lord God omnipotent, who has all power in heaven and in earth. And Jesus is his mediator and his eternal atonement. Thanks be to God who gives us victory through the blood of the everlasting covenant in Christ. Here we are in the final installment, the final message in the series on false doctrine in Hebrews, number 9. I've got quite a bit of material. I want to move through it really fast, because I could easily get sidetracked, and then I would have to do 2 messages because I really have an excessive amount of verses. But I don't want to do it in 2. So I want to get right into it so I can move right through it without too much commentary. Starting at Hebrews 12:18 through 26, I use the Dewey Reams Bible. That's the Catholic Bible. Sometimes they have a great translation. Basically, it has the whole word mountain and so forth. And it says, "For you are not come." But this is the same as all the Bibles, really. They're all the same. "For you are not come," he said. It's very important. "To a mountain that might be touched." Notice he says it might be touched. He's saying it might be. As if it could be. Right? Well, that wasn't true. And it says, "And a burning fire and a whirlwind and a darkness and storm." Well, first of all, that's not true. He's saying that the mountain might be touched. So right away, it amazes me how many false things are said in these verses that I found. They're just not true. They're not biblically sound. They're not found in the Old Testament. They're not in our Old Testament. That's the bottom line. If I read something in the New Testament and they say that, if they say the Old Testament says such and such, I want it to be there. I don't want it to be a lie. Or it's not just that it's not there, it's false. It's the opposite. I found in all these verses that it's the opposite of what's found in the Old Testament, in the books of Moses. We're really going to look at the books of Moses. We're not really looking at any other part. But the books of Moses are the bottom line on everything, since Moses was a mediator. All right, so let me read it. Exodus 19:11 through 13. "And be ready against the 3rd day, for the 3rd day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai, and you shall set bounds to the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves that you go not up to the mount." Right away saying you can't even go to the mount. Never mind, you might touch it, right? Or, it says, or touch the border of it. So you couldn't even touch the border of the mountain. Yet Hebrews, the mystery writer, is saying that it might be touched. No, it might not be touched. It should say could not be touched. Not might be. But he's saying couldn't touch the border of it. And he says, whoever touches the mount, it should say mountain. Okay, in the King James it says mount, or it should say mountain. The mountains shall be surely put to death. So, it could not be touched. Verse 13, there shall not a hand touch it. No, not even a hand. But he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come up to the mountain. So, I want to make that clear. So we made that clear, that statement is wrong. So then it goes on. So I read 18, so now we're going to read 19 of Hebrews. And the sound of a trumpet, and the voice of words, which voice they that heard asked that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. Well, that is true. So then he goes on to say, for they could not endure that which was commanded. Well, that's not true. That's his opinion. But I'm going to show by the verses that there was no mention of they hated the commandments or they could not endure the commandments. So once again, he's dissing, he is negating the law of God. This is another example of where they're always negating in the epistles. They're always speaking down and saying things against the commandments, against the law. And again, they're claiming that they couldn't endure the commandments, but that was never said. Then he goes on to say, and if so much as a beast touch the mountain, it shall be stoned or thrust through with a dart. So he still doesn't affirm, the writer of Hebrews. He still is not affirming that man could not touch it. Now he's just saying that the beast. But he's not mentioning man. He's just saying, oh, the beast couldn't touch it. He doesn't even know what the book says. He doesn't even know what the book of Moses says. And then this next statement, 21, is a lie. There is no verse in the books of Moses that says this. Verse 21, and so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I exceedingly fear and quake. Well, it amazes me, and it's amazing to me, that he never said that. Not according to our Bible. What Bible was he reading out of? There is no such thing where Moses said anything of the case, anything even similar. I mean, because he went and he would talk to God personally. He wasn't afraid of God. The people were afraid. He told them, don't be afraid, which I'll read. So back to Exodus 19:16. Let me move that up. It came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount or mountain, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that were in the camp trembled. It does say that all the people in the camp trembled. Yes. Not Moses, though. And the reason was that the trumpet was exceeding loud. It was too loud. And there were thunders and lightnings, and there was a thick cloud, and because of that, they trembled. And it goes on in the next chapter, Exodus 20, 18 through 22. And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. So once again, we see the reason why they were trembling is because of the thunderings, the lightnings, and the trumpet. And so they got away from it. They moved away from the mountain. And they said to Moses, speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. So they were afraid of God. They were fearing God, just because of all this fanfare, the thunders and the lightnings and the smoke coming from the mountain and so forth. But then Moses said to the people, "Fear not." So he's saying, don't be afraid, for God has come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not. So that was the whole idea, to get them to fear God so that they would keep the commandments. And the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. See, Moses wasn't afraid. He didn't say, "I fear and I quake," the way Hebrews says. He went right into it. He wasn't afraid. He went right into the thick darkness, into the dark cloud where God was. Now, because he was on a first name basis with God, he had an intimate relationship going. He was on a face-to-face relationship with God. In verse 22, and the Lord said to Moses, "You shall say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven." Now remember that. God is literally making it clear that he has talked with them from heaven. Now, how he did that, it's not 100% clear, but he was in heaven, that's where he lives, and he was talking to the people from heaven, which is, for God, easy, somehow or another. So then, we read back in Hebrews, we go back to Hebrews, and we find out what Hebrews is saying. And what we find is the writer of Hebrews is somehow, he's trying to compare what happened at the mountain with supposedly the life of a Christian. I find it very, very amazing, very strange, because he says, you have not come to a mount that might be touched, which is false anyway. But then he eventually says in verse 22, all right, and get a load of all this. Verse 22, but you are come to Mount Zion. I changed it to Zion in the King James, it's Sion, but we know it as Zion. And to the city of the living God. Well, what is he talking about? He's trying to compare the earthly experience of the Israelites and say that the modern day Christians are like somehow in heaven or something. Now we go to heaven because of Jesus. We're in heaven like now, like they were in heaven, the believers in the day. Because it says, into the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. No, nobody that has lived on the earth, in fact, like I always say, nobody has even gone to heaven, even now. Nobody. They're in paradise in the center of the earth. But he's claiming that somehow believers in Jesus are in the heavenly Jerusalem, and they've come to the mountain of God, Mount Zion, which is really supposed to be Jerusalem. And it says, to an innumerable company of angels. So he's claiming we are in the presence of an innumerable company of angels. Well, no, we certainly are not. So this is like fantasy. But he's saying heavenly Jerusalem. He's not saying earthly Jerusalem. And he says to the general assembly. He's talking about the scene in the book of Revelation. This is where we've come to. Oh, yeah, all the believers, they immediately were brought into heaven as soon as Jesus raised from the dead. No. To the general assembly and the church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and that's not that clear, which are written in heaven. No, they'd be in heaven. And to God, the judge of all. So he's claiming we're right there with God now. We're all the believers of the day, they've all gone and they're with God, the judge of all. It's not true. It's like a pipe dream. It's fantasy. And it says, and to the spirits of just men made perfect. So all the people that died, they're all there, and now they're made perfect, and they're in heaven. Heavenly Jerusalem. No. And then it says, and to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant. So Jesus is there because he's in heaven with God, and so we're in heaven? No. Not. And to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. I just wanted to focus on that because I think it should say that speaks better things than that of goats and calves, lambs and sheep. Because that's really what the law was about. It wasn't about the power of the blood of men. And really, when God said, your blood, or your brother's blood, when God said to Cain, your brother's blood cries to me from the ground, that's all he said. Which is, in other words, you killed your brother. And you shed his blood, and it's a crime. But then he didn't even say, I'm going to hammer you into the ground like a peg. No, he said anybody that tries to take vengeance on Cain was going to be punished. So that didn't really make any sense, So he's focusing on Abel. We should be focusing on the blood of the sacrifices of the tabernacle, which I'm going to get into very shortly here. Verse 25, see that you refuse him not that speaks. For if they escape not who refused him that spoke on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him that speaks from heaven? Now what did I just read? God says in no uncertain terms that I have spoken to you from heaven. Now he's claiming, he's insinuating, he's trying to say that somehow God did not speak from heaven and that now Jesus speaks from heaven. Or that somehow God now speaks from heaven with this new covenant, but he didn't speak from heaven to the people in the old covenant. But we know because we just read what it said, that he spoke, he literally spoke himself, God Almighty, and said, I am speaking to you from heaven. And here he's lying and saying that trying to make you believe that somehow he didn't speak from heaven, he was just speaking on earth. He's saying, who refused him that spoke on earth. See? But he didn't know what the book said. He didn't know what the writings of Moses had. He was typical of all these disciples and so forth of the day. And they didn't know what was in the Old Testament. And he goes on to say in verse 26, whose voice then shook the earth, but now he has promised, saying, yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. Now that statement just doesn't make any sense. That's all. So he's going to shake heaven. What do you mean? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, you could continue to try to make sense out of it. Because where does he shake earth? That's not the kind of power we see manifest. We don't see God shaking the earth in Jesus' name. We don't see it. And what he's talking about shaking heaven makes no sense either. We move up to Hebrews 12. There's 2 verses right here, 28 and 29. Wherefore we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved. No, the kingdom of God is always unmovable. It was unmovable from the mountain. It was unmovable before the earth. It's always unmovable. It was unmovable in the Old Testament. It's just the people were movable. The people refused to keep the law. They refused to keep the commandments. That's all. They just wanted to do their own thing. And it says, let us have grace. If they kept the law, then they had grace. And it's the same way now. Whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, for our God is a consuming fire. Now he's trying to make the New Testament power, the New Testament spirit, where God manifests himself as a consuming fire. No, God does not manifest himself at this point in time, and in the New Testament at all, as a consuming fire. He manifested himself as a consuming fire in the days of Moses. He would burn up people just suddenly. He would just appear and burn them to death. He killed the sons of Aaron when they offered strange fire. They were not following the law. We don't know anything more about that, but he just consumed them by a flame. That was it. So once again, he's trying to say, our religion has God as a consuming fire. No, the Old Testament, he could do it, but he doesn't do it now. He hasn't done it in the 2,000 years that the new covenant of Jesus has been in effect. We go to Hebrews 13, 11 and 12. For the bodies of those beasts whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin are burned outside the camp. Wherefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered outside the gate. So here he is, he's trying to compare again. He's trying to compare the sufferings of Jesus with the sacrifice of the beasts. And he's trying to say that it's the same, but I want to show you a lot of verses. He didn't know what he was talking about again, of course. Because really, the beasts did not suffer outside the gate. The only one that might have suffered is the one that they sent out without killing it. And then eventually, I imagine it suffered. But there was no killing of the goat, the scapegoat. They would send it off into the wilderness. But I don't think we should consider that. So, but all the sacrifices that were done in the tabernacle, I'm going to show you just right now, I'm going to show you in a moment an image. I'm going to show you an image of the tabernacle. And I'm going to show you some verses how all the sacrifices of animals had to be done in the tent, in the tabernacle, or else it was illegal, and the people were guilty of murder, basically. You couldn't kill an animal for meat outside of the tent. If you did that, then you were going to be destroyed. You were to be destroyed, even though a lot of the versions make it sound soft, like there was not going to be a. But if you look in the Strongs, it means destroyed. And also, he's saying that they're burned outside the camp. Well, the sacrifice of Jesus was different, very, very different. Jesus wasn't burnt. He wasn't a burnt offering. He wasn't a burnt sacrifice. So now he's trying to say that somehow Jesus is similar to the burned sacrifice or burnt sacrifice. I mean, that's totally wrong to say that. He's saying also as if the beasts suffered outside the gate. Well, no, the beasts suffered inside the tabernacle. They had to. So it's wrong. It's a lie. It's a falsehood to say that Jesus and the beasts were the same, that the beasts also suffered outside the gate of the city. That's what that means. Then he's trying to compare the burnt sacrifices to Jesus when it was not a burnt sacrifice. So here it is. Here is the tabernacle of Moses. I think it's very interesting. Here we have the brazen altar. This is where all the sacrifices had to be done. This was 7 feet by 7 feet square. And then it was 4 feet high. All the sacrifices had to be done on this altar. And if they were not, as I'll read the verse, then they were guilty of blood, it's going to say. Then they were guilty of murder, basically. And here's the laver. This is where they would wash their feet. They had to wash their hands and feet. Wash the blood. Water in here. And so here's the first, so here's the gate into the tent. The tent was fairly big. I think it was like 50 feet on the long side, something like that. And then this is the holy place. They call this the holy place. But then this is the Holy of Holies. See? So in this holy place, the first section, there was the showbread. That's what this is for right here. It says it right here, table of showbread. Then the lampstand, that's the menorah. And they had the candles. That was supposed to be the light of God. And then they had the altar of incense, which was always supposed to be burned. It was to be kept burning, apparently, at all times. And then you came into the Holy of Holies, where the Ark was, the Ark of the Covenant. And this is where God would talk to Moses. And this is where the priest would come in once a year with blood. And you had the 2 angels. And that's where the 10 Commandments were kept. And that's where the book of the law was kept. And the rod of Aaron that budded. And so that was inside of the box. They had the 2 cherubim. And then in the middle of the 2 cherubim, it was called the mercy seat. And that was where God would manifest his presence. Okay, and so now we get back into the scripture, Leviticus 17, 3 through 5. This shows the law. What man soever there be of the house of Israel that kills an ox or a lamb or goat in the camp, so you couldn't even kill it in the camp of Israel, or that kills it out of the camp, and brings it not to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation to offer an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord. So you had to kill the animal before the tabernacle, or before the Lord, which was in the tabernacle. blood shall be imputed to that man. In other words, he'll be guilty of shedding blood unlawfully. So in reality, Jesus was illegal that way according to the old covenant, because he was not sacrificed inside the tabernacle. But we're not talking about an animal, so it's a different story altogether. And that's why it's a new covenant. So you really can't compare. The writer of Hebrews is trying to compare the two. You can't compare the two. It's been upgraded. It's on a much higher level, the sacrifice of Christ, to say the least. It's an eternal sacrifice. And the animals were a temporary, earthly sacrifice. Because it says, he has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among the people, from among his people. Well, that means destroyed. But most of the versions try to say, oh, he'll be removed from his people, or he'll be cut off. But if you look, once in a while you find a version that'll say destroyed. But if you look in the Strong's, cut off means destroyed. That's one of the meanings of that word that was being used. Verse 5, to the end that the children of Israel may bring their sacrifices which they offer in the open field, even that they may bring them to the Lord, to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, to the priest, and offer them for peace offerings to the Lord. And then we look at verses 8 and 9, same chapter. And you shall say to them, whatever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers which sojourn among you, that offers a burnt offering or sacrifice, and brings it not to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, to offer it to the Lord, even that man shall be cut off from among his people. Now, it says the same thing, but I'm just saying it's repeated, even in the same chapter, it's repeated. Repeated. And so I said to myself, I had to figure out, well, how is Jesus' sacrifice legal? Because it was not in the tabernacle, it was not before God. And I came to the conclusion, and I have a lot of verses, is that Jesus was filled with God. God was with Jesus, and I'm going to read a whole bunch of verses. God was in Jesus. He was there the same way he was with the ark, in the Ark of the Covenant. And then also Jesus was an eternal spirit. He was an immortal being. That inhabited the body that God prepared. And then eventually he entered into heaven itself with his own blood, Hebrews does say, and I think I have to agree with that. So, and he didn't have like they would have the blood when they went into the tabernacle, they would have it in a cup, and they would sprinkle the blood in the mercy seat, which was between, it was really just a flat area. It was between the two statues of the gold images of the cherubim angels. Well, Jesus brought his own blood in, but he didn't, like I say, he didn't have a cup with him, and he didn't save any of it. So, he did it, but, it was done spiritually, I suppose. Because it wasn't done, his actual blood was not brought into heaven and sprinkled, on God. No. Or before God. Because they sprinkled it where God's presence was, in the tabernacle. But all these verses I want to read quickly. John 3:2, The same came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no man can do these miracles that you do. That's the key. Except God be with him, you see. So God was with him. He could not do these things. No one has been able to do these miracles that Jesus did. Since Jesus. Not in the same way. There's been some miracles. I mean, there's been some healings and miracles, but not the same way. Not with as much power as Jesus had. The 34th verse, same chapter. For he whom God has sent speaks the words of God, for God gives not the Spirit by measure to him. So there wasn't a small amount measured out like it is to people, to Jesus. There was a massive amount, a very large amount of Spirit power given to Jesus. And the next one I want to read is Acts 10:38, how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Ghost and with power, who went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed of the devil, for God was with him. Once again, God was with him. So the cross was really the altar, and God was with him, and he offered himself without spot to God. John 10:38. But if I do, though you believe not me, believe the works, that you may know and believe the Father is in me and I in him. So the power, the great power of God was working in him. The full power. John 14:10 and 11. Believe you not that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I speak to you, I speak not of myself, but the Father that lives in me, he does the works. See? The Father was living in him and doing the works. Verse 11, believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the very work's sake. John 17:21 and 22. That they all may be one, as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they may be one, that they also may be one in us. See? That the world may believe that you have sent me. See, we can be one. This verse says that we can be one also, because we can have the Spirit in us the same way Jesus had it. And that is somewhat true, but never as powerful. Never with as great power as Jesus, but we can certainly have that, and we do have that, many of us, at times. And once again, he's saying, you are in me. And the glory which you gave me, I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. See, so he wants to give the glory, the same glory. That was his desire. Hebrews, okay, here's a couple of verses. This is a different subject. 2 more verses, that's it. This is a different subject. Hebrews 13, 17, and then I'm going to read 24. Obey them that have the rule over you. He's saying that somehow there's going to be these preachers and they're going to have rule over you. Well, that's not what Jesus said. Jesus said you were going to be a servant. You weren't going to be the greatest, you were going to be the least. That the preacher was supposed to be the least. He wasn't supposed to be the greatest, and he wasn't supposed to rule over the people. This is just more religious talk. And submit yourselves. So we're supposed to, this is the hogwash that we're supposed to submit to these preachers. And no, they're supposed to submit to us. They're supposed to serve us. We're not supposed to serve them. It says, for they watch for your soul. So he's trying to make an excuse. He's trying to make an argument that somehow they're watching for our soul, so we need to let them rule over us. No. 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 God is watching for our souls. We're supposed to be in contact. We're supposed to be in communication with God. And be one with God, and be filled with God, and filled with the Spirit. And it says, and as they must give account, that they may do it with joy. Oh, yeah, right. And not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. So he's trying to claim it'll be unprofitable for you if you fight against their rulership. You know, if you don't let them rule over you, they should not be ruling. You know, lording over you. No way. You know, so he's trying to make an argument. You know, don't cause them any grief while they rule over you. The last verse, it's just repeated again. It's even repeated in the same chapter. Salute all them that have the rule over you. And all the saints, they of Italy salute you. So once again, he's claiming that the preachers should rule over the people, over the believers. And like I say, Jesus told the disciples that the greatest will be the least. The greatest will be the servant of all. That'll be the greatest, not the one who has an iron fist and is handing out orders, handing out rules and regulations to the people, to the believers.